What's going on, everybody? This is Owen from Owen's Rock and Metal Podcast. Welcome in today to episode number 38. We are here today to talk about the life of Ozzy Osbourne and the career of Black Sabbath. Fortunately, Ozzy Osbourne did pass away July 22nd of 2025, just weeks after his Back to the Beginning show. Less fortunate circumstances than we want to be coming to you today to talk about, but I'm here with my friend John. He is one of the biggest Ozzy/Black Sabbath fans I know. So just to start us off, why don't you tell us a little bit about your fandom of Sabbath and Ozzy and how long you've been a fan, what got you into them, just sort of your background with them.
Owen is correct. I am the biggest Ozzy fan he has. As you can see, we're at my house. And if you look at the background, some Black Sabbath and Ozzy stuff on the wall. Yeah, dude, Ozzy might be the go-to metal. I think he is.
He created it.
Prince of Darkness.
Back in the day,
Got really into Ozzy when I was 20. Really into it for the past 5 years, and just recently I found myself back into his catalog and into Sabbath and Ozzy. Tried to get tickets to Back to the Beginning, couldn't swing it.
Yeah.
But watched the stream, watched all 10 hours of it, and then 2 weeks later he died?
It was, I think about 17 days or so.
And that hit me hard. That one hit hard. I almost teared up.
Yeah.
I tried to keep it in, but
I know a lot of people have been probably feeling the same way. My dad listens to Ozzy's Boneyard on Sirius XM, and there's been people calling in, and they've been putting calls on grown adults all over the country. They're breaking down in tears, and this is like, some people have said this is like white people's Tupac dying, or like this is a big deal. And
this is our Elvis.
Exactly, and especially in the metal community and his impact, Black Sabbath started it all back in Birmingham, England, 1970, 69. And all those years later, he's created all this great music. So you mentioned Back to the Beginning there. What was that like? Because looking back now, that was kind of like a funeral of sorts. It was like a last sort of celebration. You try to get tickets to that. What was the craziness behind that? Like, was that that was obviously probably tough to get because there's only one show and it's across the ocean.
Yeah, 4 a.m., waking up at 4 a.m., 3 days. To a pre-sale, to another pre-sale, to the main sale, and the tickets sold out so fast. There was like 150,000 people in the queue. I think only 40,000 people could be in there. I tried, couldn't get them. But I would have ran that Discover up and flown over there.
It would have been awesome.
It would have been awesome.
But you got to watch it. So I actually was busy that weekend, and I could not watch it. So what are some of your favorite moments from the final Back to the Beginning show that stood out to you, almost a month later now?
I think the fact that some of those big bands who were so huge that showed up just to play 3 or 4 songs, maybe, Metallica, Guns N' Roses, who else was there? Slayer, Alice in Chains, all those big bands that took the time to do that just for Black Sabbath, because they understand that without their music, they would not be where they're at. Right. And everyone on stage made sure of that, which is really important. And I don't know, I think Ozzy wasn't underappreciated, but he really influenced everything.
Yeah,
in that genre,
especially in the metal,
even rock, just classic rock. I mean, he's really a hard rock. I mean, he's metal, but
the metal has evolved so much to where if we look back, it would fit more in a hard rock category, especially maybe some of his solo stuff. Going through the '80s and that different sound that he had on albums like The Ultimate Sin or Bark at the Moon. But if we take it back to Sabbath, it's been a couple weeks since Ozzy died. It's been about a month since Back to the Beginning. As I understand it, Back to the Beginning was a big moment where it kind of springboarded you back into this music. What sort of tracks or albums have you been really having on repeat a lot with? Let's just start with Sabbath specifically, and then we can talk Ozzy solo stuff.
Sabotage. That one for all the Black Sabbath fans out there, they know. Even all their full catalog, that might be. I think that was Ozzy's peak.
I think vocally, I would definitely agree with you. For me, I would have to agree that Sabotage has been one that I've really been getting into a lot. Prior to that, I liked Sabotage, but I didn't like it as much as some of the other ones. Like, I really liked Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. But after listening to it and really hearing his vocals, specifically on a song like The Rip, which I've really been listening to a lot lately, I've come to appreciate that album a whole lot more. I think it's the whole package. I think the story behind that album and the context where they were getting sued in court and they were suing their management because they were stealing money from Sabbath. And that's a whole nother story, which we could do a whole deep dive of an episode on. But the whole energy and emotion that they had while recording that album really shines through. that is one that I've really been listening to a lot since Ozzy's passing. But obviously, you've got the classics, like their first album, which, it's a lot of just jam songs put together. Like the track that includes NIB, it's 4 different titles put into one. Same thing with the last track on that album. So some of the early stuff definitely stands out as well.
I think all those first 5 albums really culminate in that 6th one. There's an internet joke of, you can trust yourself in the first 6 Sabbath albums.
Right.
I disagree, but I understand where that's coming from, because after Sabotage, I think the drugs really started to kick in. It's just so good.
Yeah.
It's such a good, you got thrash on it. You got the heavy stuff.
Some of the Universe.
You have just 9-minute songs in 1975, which is just odd.
Right. Thrill of It All. Hole in the Sky.
So good.
The Writ. So and then you have, Am I Going Insane in there, which is a little, it strays from the rest of the sound, but I still like it.
All of Ozzy's Sabbath albums are great. And that's not even me just being a hardcore Ozzy fan. They're just good albums. They have good music.
And you include 13 in that as well?
Correct. Even with 13 and without Billboard, you listen to Tony and Geezer, and those two on those guitars are just so good.
Yeah.
What I loved about Sabbath is how Geezer really, you could hear him. Mm-hmm. You hear his bass playing, and I don't care what anyone says. Ozzy singing with Tony's riffs is sick. He doesn't really do his own thing. He sings with the riff, and I think that's sick. So.
Yeah, definitely. Some of those early tracks, especially, you can definitely hear that.
What's your favorite Black Sabbath Ozzy song?
My favorite Black Sabbath Ozzy song?
I'll tell you mine.
Let's start with yours.
War Pigs. You just can't beat
War Pigs. I think somebody asked me that yesterday, and I had to think about it. And I came up with War Pigs, and it's kind of a cliche answer because that's one of their most popular songs.
There's a reason why.
There's a reason why.
Yeah.
It's that good. Now, it's not like the most popular. That would probably be like Paranoid or Iron Man. But I really like that song. I really like NIB as well.
Oh,
which is
so good.
Which is just a great song.
The fact that all these songs, this song was 1970.
1970.
It's that old.
And here we are in 2025.
And it's still so heavy.
55 years later. Yeah. And we're still appreciating it. And then, there's songs like After Forever or Into the Void.
Yeah, that are just nuts.
Just a great riff. And Snowblind, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, The National Acrobat.
Yeah.
I really like Killing Yourself to Live. I like the lyrics on that.
You love that album.
I love that album. I really
loves that album. I love it too, but I don't know.
And then we talked about Sabotage, Hole in the Sky, Thrill of It All,
The Red.
Symptom of the Universe.
Yeah, we can't forget that one.
And then there's Technical Ecstasy, which it's a lot of people, like you mentioned earlier, they focus on the first 6, but Ozzy did 2 more Sabbath albums with his original run in Sabbath.
Mm-hmm. And they're great albums.
They're great albums.
My favorite is Never Say Die. I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah.
That's okay. I think they were just doing what they wanted. Their name was out there, and they're like, we want to make some jazzier songs, some more radio-friendly stuff for Saturday Night Live. What's wrong with that?
Talk about that a little bit.
For a very, very short time, Sabbath was Saturday Night Live's official studio band. So the song Breakout, which was one of the first songs that introduced me to Sabbath, which is so crazy, is a jazzy, what is that? How would you even describe that song? Just a jazz,
it's like instrumental.
late night intro show.
Yeah.
Or song.
It's got like a brass section, and it's got
saxophone solo, and just a jazzy beat by Billward. So yeah, it was sick.
Oh,
they have a little bit of everything.
You mentioned Breakout being one of the things that introduced you more to Sabbath.
What was really that got me there?
Yeah, could you talk a little bit more about how you kind of discovered Sabbath and what's got you into them? Because I know you said that was kind of college days.
Everyone knew Paranoid and Iron Man growing up on the radio with your dad playing it. Got into a band called the Rival Sons, who opened for Sabbath on their final world tour. And just came across YouTube one day, Rival Sons playing War Pigs. I'm like, what? Can I cuss on your show?
Yeah.
What the fuck is this song? And it was so sick. And then the first thing I did is look up War Pigs, Black Sabbath. Took me to Ozfest 2005. Look it up right now. And from that point on, just Ozzy walking out on stage, being himself, mooning the crowd, and just that song stuck with me. Mm-hmm. And I went to Spotify and hit shuffle on Black Sabbath, and the first song that came up was Breakout. And then a Tony Martin song from a different Sabbath album, but we won't talk about him today. And then from there, it just spiraled, and it's my favorite band and will always be my favorite band.
Always
my favorite band. Wow. So War Pig, it just spiraled from another band.
Which is interesting because that just shows how all these bands are connected. And
Yeah.
Rival Sons, they were at the Back to the Beginning too,
which
is
I think
cool
was very
because
important.
that shows that whatever connection they had,
Right.
you know, a band like Sabbath, they're well established, and you would think, oh, they maybe have a band open with them, but maybe they're not that close. But it shows that there was definitely some kind of connection there,
Right.
and they stuck together and they remembered them. And I think that's
right. I think it was important because they opened for their final tour, and there was other at Back to the Beginning. It wasn't just metal bands. You had the Rival Sons, Hailstorm, Youngblood, Guns N' Roses, House of Chains. Those are rock. Those are metal.
Right.
And I mean, it was just the way Sabbath really paved the way for just the whole genre.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everyone talks about like Led Zeppelin and the Beatles, but like Black Sabbath.
Black Sabbath did a lot for the heavier side of things.
Yeah.
It's funny, initially, when you go back and listen to old interviews, they don't even consider themselves heavy metal.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, we were just playing like blues stuff, and like they just, I don't know, turned up their amps louder or something. But
well,
they weren't going out and saying, we're going to create a new genre. They were just jamming, and this was the product.
With Tony's finger and the bigger strings. Was part of it. Made the sound heavier.
Right.
So they're the godfathers of heavy metal. There's a reason they have a bridge in Birmingham, and this was such a hit to this community.
Yeah, and speaking of the Birmingham, aside from the metal community, Ozzy is and all of the guys in Black Sabbath are huge figures in Birmingham.
They're trying to name the airport after Ozzy.
I was going to say that they want to name the airport after him. They want to do something to recognize.
They should. I'm a flying to Ozzy Osbourne International.
That would be pretty sick. That would be pretty sick.
Yeah.
And also just talking about Ozzy's background as like a blue collar working class family and his ability to make it. And from stories I've just heard from people who have interacted with him, it sounds like he never lost like where he came from.
No.
Like he always appreciated
a working class hero,
his roots and his ability. And like he came from, you know, I think I heard like he didn't even have plumbing in his house until he was like a teenager. So I think he never lost appreciation for that, which, you know, think about the conditions we live in today. We came from something, you know, I didn't come from the slums or anything like that, but if I did, you know.
Birmingham's real gloomy. It's real like factories, and it's just rainy and dark.
Right.
So it's perfect for their sound. Like the song Black Sabbath is just really dark and gloomy and upset and irritated. Like just
it was scary to people when it first came out. And that song Black Sabbath
is a crazy album opener.
Yeah.
For 1970.
I love
the first band.
The thunderstorm intro and then the bells and then
it's just the meanest.
It just sounds nasty.
That chord is just that first chord.
Yeah, the notes.
So scary.
That started it all. That was like, it's almost like
Ozzy's voice.
Storybook, like beginning where it's like this
and
guy.
And then it goes into the wizard.
And this guy gets his fingers cut off and he has to, and bloodshed or whatever starts this heavy metal music, which, you know, a lot of people considered like satanic at the time or whatever. But
how would you describe like Ozzy's voice? It's very droning.
Yeah.
But in a good way. And it's such a unique sound.
Some say it's like he has hornets under his hat, but
yeah,
I've seen that meme, but I don't know how true that is.
But those first, when he was in Sabbath, his voice was just young and droning.
It was
scary.
It was strong. And,
on Black Sabbath, the song.
Yeah. And then think too, like a song like where his voice is different, like Planet Caravan, where he's like actually singing. And it's like, it draws you in because it's got these different dynamics and tones.
Like that or Solitude. Those, what would you call those?
I don't know if I'd call them ballads, but they're like softer tracks, maybe a little more like psychedelic.
Yeah, psychedelic.
So Ozzy, you know, we've kind of talked on his career with Black Sabbath, and we touched on Never Say Die. So after the Never Say Die album, he
kicked him out of the band. They kicked him out.
Well, so if I remember correctly, he left prior to Never Say Die. Then he came back, and then they said, all right, we're going to have to kick you out.
He was being an asshole, didn't want to sing some songs.
Yeah.
The Billboard sang a few. And
And
the last two. But after the Never Say Die, they're like, you're out of here.
He's done. And Sabbath goes on, and they do other stuff with Ronnie James Dio and a bunch of other singers. But Ozzy also keeps going, too, because music is such a big part of Ozzy's life. He's not going to just rest on that Paranoid money. He's going to keep going. And
Black Sabbath's manager. Oh, yeah, keep going.
So he went
on a drug ban. He got kicked out of his band. He went on a drug ban and was pretty much going to just drink and drug himself to death. And Black Sabbath's manager sent his daughter, who is Sharon, to go save him. And she's pulled him out of drugs, and they fell in love and said, you need to get up and keep singing. And then was it 80 or 81 is when Blizzard came out?
So in the UK, it was 80.
Okay, so it came out in the
United States, it was 81.
Okay, so what, 2 years after Never Say Die, he drops one of the biggest
Blizzard of Oz.
Biggest metal albums. I mean, this one.
If you haven't heard this album, stop the podcast and go listen to it.
I don't know. Is that one of the? That's the most important metal album ever. One of them.
You know,
one and Black Sabbath.
Magazines like Rolling Stone, they put together lists. I would probably put this in a top 10
with like some Metallica stuff.
I would put I would consider like Master of Puppets up there in terms of like influence and like Paranoid.
I'd say, but like Heaven and Hell.
Heaven and Hell is a great album too.
It's an Ozzy day.
It's crazy that they both came out within like.
I know.
Here we are in the year 2025, and it's like
they're still so important.
Exactly, but imagine being a kid in 1980 and you like this kind of music, and you're like, it's new and it's like happening. But now it feels like all the bands that are huge are old, and there's some struggle for maybe newer voices. But that's also another topic. But
Blizzard of Oz, he just can't. His persona.
Even the cover, we show it a little closer there.
Yeah, he's just dressed funny. He's got different hair, and he's just.
I've heard some people say they didn't like, the cross, and it's like.
Yeah, but I mean, their whole thing is the religion, and they all wore crosses and questioning all that stuff. But I know he's got that persona. And
I've heard stories too about when the first, when Oz was kicked out of Sabbath, he had diehard fans, like people, even at, we talked on Dio a little bit, at Ronnie James Dio's funeral, there were Ozzy fans protesting there.
Yeah.
Which Ozzy did not even like himself.
No.
So
I think they were friends later in life.
I think so too.
There's stories of Ozzy and Dio backstage, like, tell me about your grandkids and stuff like that.
Yeah. They got along, but
there's a lot of egos in metal and rock.
Everybody, we all have our own egos, but when Ozzy went off, nobody knew what he was going to do. Like, nobody knew what band members he was going to have. And he gets with Randy Rhoads, who, guitar players will still talk about Randy Rhoads to this day. And his work on these first two solo albums, Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman, are
actually incredible.
They're great work.
Listening back, someone on the internet was like, his tone kind of sucked. I'm like, please delete your comment and delete your profile forever. Like, his tone was bad. Jake was better. I'm like, all right. I'm not going to get into internet.
You have some different opinions, definitely.
A lot of Oz opinions.
Get into the subreddits, and we'll see what people are.
You'll see me getting pissed off. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, Randy Rhoads, man, you really gotta understand that without Randy, I don't know if Ozzy would have been where he's at. Because if Jake was the first one, would Blizzard have been that big and would have sent? Because this is Ozzy's biggest album still. His first one.
It's my personal favorite Ozzy solo album. I mean, I'm just going to read off some of the tracks here. I Don't Know, Crazy Train. I mean, everybody knows.
I want to say he played 4 songs at his last show, and 3 of them were off his first album.
I mean, Suicide Solution.
He played that. I forgot. He played Suicide Solution. I Don't Know, and Crazy Train.
He played Suicide Solution
right
at the beginning?
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool.
And then his last song was Crazy Train, I think.
Okay,
of course.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then
that's how important this album was. His last show, I think he knew he was dying soon. I mean, he's looking rough. 3 of the songs of his first album.
It's almost like a greatest hits album for Oz.
It really is. Every song's good.
Yeah.
Not a bad song.
And it's what a way to start his career and really bounce back from whatever drama was going on with Sabbath, and
a lot
to keep himself, relevant. And like we said before, everybody knows Crazy Train.
Everyone knows Crazy Train.
So then Randy tragically dies after doing 2 albums, Blizzard and Diary, and then the sound maybe shifts a little bit more.
Yeah, I don't have Bark the Moon. He had to keep going.
He keeps going.
I think he had a couple guitar players from certain bands like Rat and stuff like that didn't work out, but he landed on Jake Lee. I don't know where Jake's from. Was he from another band? I should know this, but I'm not a big Jake fan album.
I'm not sure either. We can look it up on the spot. But
Jake Lee came in and
he does Bark at the Moon. Which that's the song Bark.
Song's sweet.
You'll still hear that on the radio too.
Yeah. The album's a little okay.
It gets a little more between Bark at the Moon and Ultimate Sin. It's a little pop. You hear more synth in there.
Synthesizer, the 80s sound. And it's just kind of like.
Even Ozzy's look. He has blonde hair.
It's really started permanent.
Yeah.
He started looking.
Yeah. But the Ultimate Sin, when he goes on tour for this album, he brings a little band called Metallica.
Had to slip it in.
Well, this also just talks about his influence, not only as a performer, but in the amount of bands he helped along the way. Even Sabbath back in the day, Rush had opened for Sabbath before Kiss had opened for Sabbath. A lot of bands that would go on to have successful careers got their start opening for Sabbath. And the same thing could be said for Ozzy.
Yeah, Van Halen opened for Sabbath in 78. They were like bigger. They like blew them out of the water. Didn't Motley Crue open in 83 for the Bark the Moon tour?
I think so. Yeah.
Motley Crue, and then Ultimate Sin was Metallica. So these little nobody bands who just started in metal or hard rock.
And and a lot of that we saw it back to the beginning, Ozzy kind of giving thanks to those bands by having some of them back and giving them a platform, because transitioning from Ozzy's solo career, just as an aside, somebody like, let's say Youngblood, for example, maybe not a lot of people in the community were aware of him or a fan of him, but his performance at Back to the Beginning was a moment where a lot of people could maybe be introduced to his music or come to appreciate his sound a little more. And, if that's the case or not, Ozzy gave him that moment. But back to Ozzy's solo stuff, Ultimate Sin, the sound kind of changes.
Started getting really popular.
Little poppy.
Getting popular.
Yeah. So he's climbing up the charts. He's
got his persona solidified.
Right.
And it was like a battle with Black Sabbath. I mean, you had Tony Iommi keep going with Dio. And I wanted to mention this. They did the one with Dio, and I think they did the live album in 83. Then Dio left, and then they did Born Again in 84 with Ian Gillan. But what I think is so funny is that they keep going to this band. Bill Ward's gone, and then they do the reunion at Live Aid. How would you feel if you were Dio or Ian Gillan? And it's like, okay, you just kick him out and you're just doing the reunion with, Ozzy. And I think that was 85 was Live Aid.
It was.
So that was Ultimate Sin, but Bill Ward came back. So why? But Ozzy was so big, he's like, I'm not coming back. I wonder if there was talks backstage like, hey, why don't we come back? But no, didn't happen.
Yeah, I was reading an article in Guitar World. They talked about the whole Live Aid experience, and I think they may have just been kind of on their separate paths.
I think Bill Ward had solo albums. Geezer has solo albums. They all had big heads, except I think Geezer is more low-key and chill, but they all had Tony Iommi. Oh, my God.
It's his band.
I mean, he's the owner of Black Sabbath. Come on now.
That's his band. He's the only consistent member. There was even a time in the late 80s with Black Sabbath where
Black Sabbath.
It was just Tony.
Featuring Tony Iommi.
Yeah. It was
that was supposed to be a Tony album. Yeah. Label said no.
Black Sabbath sells more copies than...
The mid 80s for Ozzy is my least favorite because he's just running around with Jake. But the early 80s and the late 80s, that's my favorite. And I think he kind of found his way in the late 80s.
Speaking of the late 80s, so Jake leaves the band. So Ozzy, I feel, is very much, his eras are defined by his guitarists.
Correct.
Because they change.
Correct.
And after Jake leaves the band, which... Do you know the story behind why Jake
I don't know, actually.
Wasn't it with Sharon or some...
It's probably dispute, Sharon.
But I don't know the whole story either. I would have to do more research on that. But Jake E. Lee leaves the band, and Ozzy gets with this guitarist, Zakk Wylde.
The greatest guitarist Ozzy ever had.
His opinion.
I think he's better than... I mean, I don't know.
I like Randy Rhoads' stuff more.
Forgetting Randy Rhoads, Zakk is the best out of all the ones he's had.
Better than Tony.
Tony doesn't count. I saw this earlier where it's like, no, Tony wasn't Ozzy's guitarist. He was
Black Sabbath's guitarist.
Minus Tony Iommi and Randy Rhoads, Zakk is the best. Because Ozzy had a lot. Well, some that aren't even on record.
Even aside from who is the best, Zakk was with him for the longest.
Right.
He did the most albums with him, and he started out with him
in 87. He was like 18. He graduated high school into Ozzy Osbourne University. That's what he says.
He's a funny guy. Yeah. And I know you're a big fan of his. Focusing on the Zakk era, that covers No Rest for the Wicked, No More Tears, which that was really that was supposed to be his last album initially. And he did the whole No More Tours, and he did a coming out of retirement tour. It was a retirement sucks tour, I think he called it. And then they did Osmosis, but focusing, and there's many more albums.
He had the most albums with
Oz, yeah. So just talking maybe about some of those Zakk era stuff, what stands out to you across those 5 to 6 albums that Zakk was on?
Ozzy saw a picture of Zakk and was like, he looks like Randy Rhoads. And he said he's a Randy Rhoads freak. He was a Sabbath freak, probably more than Ozzy was. He probably knew more of those early Sabbath songs than Ozzy could remember them. And he was just tired of listening to all the albums that were sent in, the people who were trying to get his guitarists. And he just picked one. It was Zakk Wylde, and he said, bring him over. So they flew him out, and the rest is history. I mean, No Rest for the Wicked is good. That pinch harmonic, man, on that, you can hear it on that album.
Yeah.
What blows me away is like 18 or 19 recording that.
And you're playing with
Ozzy Osbourne.
And like you mentioned, Zack's a big Black Sabbath fan, so this is like got to be a huge
and
deal.
How did he handle that being such a young kid? Like, if I was 19 doing that, I'd be freaking out.
Nervous. I'd be very nervous.
I'd be freaking out.
I'd be very nervous too.
So, yeah, I mean, No Rest for the Wicked's pretty sick. But No More Tears in 1990. That's what? No More Tears, Mama, I'm Coming Home, Mr. Tinker Train, AVH on the back. What's the
Road to Nowhere?
Yeah, Hellraiser.
Desire, No More Tears.
Zach's playing and soloing on that album. This is where Ozzy really, I think, not peaks, but he really finds himself.
And we talk about like popularity, like these songs. These songs are massively popular as well. No More Tears, Mama, I'm Coming Home. Yeah. You just go on TikTok or the internet or whatever. Yeah. You're going to hear those songs, especially after his passing. I think everybody was listening to Mama, I'm Coming Home.
Yeah, it almost brings a tear to that eye.
It's getting incredibly popular, and it is a emotional song.
Right. We didn't even talk about Changes.
We didn't talk about Changes.
There's too much.
We can talk about Changes. But
well, let's go through the rest of his. Let's talk. So he does 90. I think he really finds his sound at 90.
Because this was what, 92, I think.
I think it's 91. Maybe it's 92.
Let's look it up.
I think it's 90. It was 87, then 90. So he does No More Tears. He's just that hard rock sound. He leaves the 80s sound behind.
It was 91. Number of 91.
Does much touring. Zach's sounding good. And then the greatest. This is his best album. I'm going to say that.
This is what I'm saying.
But I'm aware. See, when I say that, I'm aware of how good Paranoid is and Volume 4 is. And I'm aware of how good Blizzard is. But as a hardcore fan, those can't be my favorites because those are everyone's favorite.
You don't want to be too like cliche.
Yeah. But I love it. They're ranked the same. But my personal favorite is Osmosis.
So this is your favorite album? That
1995.
A solo work or of all his work? Are you saying this is better than Black Sabbath?
No. This is my favorite solo album.
Okay. I'll allow that.
It's just too heavy, dude.
It does. No. So we kind of talked about some of the touring timelines with like this No More Tears was going to be his last album. He does a No More Tours. And that was going to be it. And then he was going to retire. He was going to focus on his family more.
He loved performing, dude. He wasn't going to retire.
He loved it. I mean, that's what he wanted to go out. He said, I would die on that stage, and he damn near did.
He did.
And
it was a funeral, like you said.
Right.
Literally. It was kind of thinking back. It was like,
this is my.
Like, does everyone know?
No, I don't think.
Like, I felt like, but like the dudes on stage, like, we love you, like giving all this homage. Like, maybe they knew it was coming soon.
I mean, maybe they knew he was.
He
had Parkinson's, which is a debilitating disease. They knew he was, he's not going to really probably get better because of the disease he had. So they probably knew this might be it. But I don't know if people knew he was going to pass away within like 17 days.
I always said that they will wheel him out in a chair and he can't walk, and they will sell that place out. And they did that. And
that's exactly what happened.
They could have done it 10 times and it would have sold out every time.
Oh, sure.
I would have done it.
Sure.
I mean, I tried to go. I tried to fly to England for the first time in my life to see Ozzy.
Yeah.
Not to go be a tourist, just to go to Birmingham. That's it.
That's like somebody flying here to go to Detroit.
Literally, just to go downtown. Like, why would you go to Detroit? No, I'm going to Birmingham. I want to go see Oz.
So then he does
95
Retirement
Osmosis
Sucks tour, and then he comes back and
does Osmosis. Zach leaves the band for the tour and starts Black Label and all that other stuff. And then, but comes back. So Ozzy gets big in the 90s, and then 2001 comes.
Well, before we move to 01, this does feature Geezer Butler.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. That's why I think I like it so much, because you can hear it, and it's so fucking heavy. Mm-hmm. And I saw some dude on the internet go,
the bass is great.
My dad worked on this album as an engineer, and they literally turned everything up to 10. Mm-hmm. That's why it sounds so fucking heavy on like Thunder Underground and My Jekyll Doesn't Hide and fucking Perry Mason.
Even like See You on the Other Side has got like such a great sound.
The
it's not
rhythm
like
section. I think it's the guy who died. I can't remember his name.
The drummer?
Yeah, I should know. Castillo. Randy Castillo just had a big sound, and Geezer's bass. I mean, come on now. It's Geezer Butler. He toured. Geezer toured a little bit. I've never even opened it.
It was Dean Castronovo on drums, Geezer Butler on bass, and Zach Wild on guitar.
Then I think Randy Castillo died before. I can't remember, but then I was wrong. But still.
It's okay to be wrong.
It's Geezer Butler.
I mean, he's the OG Sabbath player, and we talked about kind of what those guys all kind of went off and did.
So heavy.
Geezer just hanging out. Ozzy phones him up, says, hey, let's make an album.
Let's make an album.
I wonder why, because Ozzy had rewinding to Blizzard here, Ozzy had a drummer, Lee Kerslake.
Lee Kerslake recorded it, but then Tommy, I can't remember his name.
Tommy Aldridge
was like
he toured.
And
then he did
Diary. I don't get it.
Why did he never call up Bill Ward? I mean, they're buddies. Bill Ward and
Ozzy were best friends.
Like they were close. Like Bill Ward left the band
because he left the band after Heaven and Hell.
He did, yeah. So he recorded Heaven and Hell,
but didn't tour.
He didn't tour because he's like, it's not the same. I miss Ozzy. Basically,
yeah. He was on heavy drugs too. He was as bad as Ozzy too.
And I think some people say like Bill Ward showed all this loyalty to Oz, but Oz maybe didn't show it back because he played shows without Bill Ward. And
we can't forget that Sharon has a lot of hands in this,
especially from the 90s on. Like Sharon
had her say. She had her choice. She had people she didn't like. She was as a hardcore Ozzy fan. Ozzy fans do not like Sharon. Everyone loves her and adores her, but she was a problem and really controlled Ozzy in a lot of ways. But it gave us the opportunity to have all these different artists play with him.
Yeah, and in her defense, like you said, when they first got together,
she did save his life.
She saved his life, and this whole last show, she put it on. Like
she did. I'm not giving her credit, but some dudes get upset. Like, why'd you kick him out?
Yeah,
I think I've heard stories of like, I can't remember his name, but like a bass player showing up to a show and like flew his family out to play with Ozzy. Went backstage and the manager's like, get out of here. You're out of the band. He's like, what the hell? And Sharon kicked him out. I'd have to find that. That was my Ozzy obsession in 2020.
Yeah.
Like he flew his family out. He's like, I'm going to be playing on stage with Oz. And they're like, nope, you're out of the band. But I'm sure that happens more than we realize. There's always the outside factors.
But not to dog on Sharon too much. She did just lose
her
husband.
I know. But with his music career, she had a lot of control.
There's fair criticism out there.
She was his manager, so.
She ran the show. So 90s Oz is great, in my opinion.
It's only 2 albums.
It's only 2 albums, but they're both great.
And I don't want to forget that almost every Ozzy solo show, he probably plays Paranoid. He played Paranoid, War Pigs a lot.
I want to say he played Children of the Grave.
He played that one, and he played Iron Man. So he'd probably play at least 2 Sabbath songs, which shows, I mean, obviously they were his songs too, but
it's what he's known for, and that's the roots.
They're good songs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then Ozzy's career doesn't end there. He keeps going into the 2000s, and you started to get into this one.
He makes
Down to Earth.
Yeah, he drops Down to Earth and starts the Osbournes. Now,
which I think you got on DVD right over there.
Yeah,
but
I get it.
The Osbournes is really where I think a lot of people in the younger generation will see and know him from, and especially
that's the long stray hair and the circle glasses and the mumbling. That's the Ozzy everyone knows. That's not my favorite Ozzy.
No.
It's cool, but that's the Ozzy everyone knows. Like the silly, the rambling, you can't understand them.
Right.
The black, long hair, circle glasses.
Now you see clips of that show being circulated everywhere. It's kind of cool that we got to see that side of him, like burritos, and see him like being a dad and that sort of aspect.
Well, the late 90s and the 2000s, he started the Ozfest, so he really started just taking advantage of not taking advantage of it, but like his name was just so huge.
What is it, cashing in on it and capitalizing on it?
And he was what's the word we use? Like he wasn't just a famous rock singer, he was just famous.
He was like a pop culture
figure.
He was bigger than just a musician.
Right. He's in commercials, he's in some movies, and
he had a TV show. Which that was when reality TV was still evolving.
Right.
But yeah, Ozzy was huge.
So 2001 with Down to Earth, it's just a heavy album. It's real institutionalized for Ozzy. And then he does the Osbournes, and he's just so huge. He's doing a bunch of Ozfests. And he does a cover album in 05, which I forget about.
Undercover.
With the Alice in Chains.
Jerry Cantrell on Wikipedia is listed as the guitar player.
I think that's right.
And
he does Mississippi Queen, which is sick.
He does Mississippi Queen, does some Beatles songs, which Ozzy loved the Beatles.
He did love the Beatles. I don't know a lot of the songs on that album. I don't recognize
He did an Eagles song, Rocky Mountain Way.
Yeah, Rocky Mountain Way.
Joe Walsh
Rocky Mountain Way and
Mississippi Queen.
Sick. Those are
he did Sympathy for the Devil.
That's the Rolling Stones song.
Cover. Yeah. So just showing, he's kind of trying different things, but maybe that was his way of paying homage to these bands that he liked from the 70s and even growing up, like the Beatles.
So 05, he does that. Osbournes, the Ozfest.
But even then, too, like we kind of skipped over this in the late 90s, he gets back with Sabbath for reunion.
I forgot.
And then 05, you mentioned earlier, he's doing Ozfest with Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
He's doing War Pigs.
I think the first Ozfest was in 95. I think Osmosis, that tour. And then he did it in 96. I think he skipped a year, but I think in 97, Black Sabbath was going to do the reunion, they have an album and they made 2 songs. They were going to make a whole album, but it didn't happen.
Right. And you can find that streaming on Spotify if you want to hear that.
It's called Reunion.
Yeah.
Black Sabbath Reunion 1998.
And they did the Last Supper tour, which the poster's for Over My Shoulder, which is a sick poster.
It's sick.
And so Sabbath keeps going. They didn't create a whole album like you say, but I think what we're trying to get at here is Ozzy's career just kept evolving. He was in Sabbath and he got kicked out, but it didn't stop.
Yeah, and he never forgot his roots. I mean, doing the reunion '85, then I think he reunited here and there a little bit with like Tony Iommi on stage for stuff, and Geezer was on the album, and then they did the '98 with all 4 of them.
I think they always remained friendly.
Right. And out of like the 10 Ozfest, I think like 4 or 5 of them, the original Black Sabbath was the headliner, the original lineup.
Right.
So he never forgot.
And we were talking about, to kind of circle things together here, what Ozzy, like when they would have bands open for himself or with Sabbath, the Ozfest was another way for bands to be introduced. Like Slipknot
took off because of 99.
Ozfest was a big leap for them.
Correct.
And that's just one example.
That's what he would do.
You look back at some of those Ozfest lineups, it's like, man, I wish I would have been there.
I know. So. I think 98, I'm just saying this, like Limp Bizkit was there, and that was right after their first album. That took them off.
Right.
Like, I've seen like Lamb of God at like 05 when they were like nobodies. So yeah, these huge metal monsters now were started at Ozfest on the Doritos stage at like noon,
little
or
side
something.
stage, right? Yeah. And now they're like Slipknot. They had their own fest, not fest.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then, like you said, Ozzy doesn't stop. Like he says on Black Rain, I don't want to stop.
Does that know 7?
7. That is the last. Well,
Zakk Wylde album.
The last Zakk full Zakk Wylde album. Black Rain 07, because Ozzy kicks him out.
Right. Yeah. You know, Zakk Wylde had his own band, Black Label Society. He goes, I'm not the lead singer of Black Label Society. Go do your own thing. And then he gets the dude from Greece, Gus G. Great album, Scream. I think it's underrated. Do I have it?
You do, yeah.
I do have it. There's a lot of really good songs on here, but it's definitely a Gus album. That dude fucking shreds.
The funny thing about this album is,
dude, he shreds on
the song "Let Me Hear You Scream."
Yeah.
So I had a Madden game on the Wii, 2011, and that was on there. And I remember hearing that. I think they had like Crazy Train on there too, but that was like one of my first introductions to that song. I didn't go out and listen to the whole album until many years later, but it just shows, like we talked about, everybody knows Crazy Train. You'll hear it in sports arenas. It's in video games. It's really a part of our culture. They say Americans have no culture, but
I don't.
Wait a minute, he's British.
No, I don't care. Crazy Train's our song.
Yeah, it is kind of. Yeah. Everybody knows it. So
does 2010. I think the Osbourne stopped, and he's such just a label. Like his name is just so huge at this point.
I think if you're at a point where you can be recognized by one name, Ozzy, like you're pretty well established.
And so, but see, you forget, after 2010, then he does a whole album of Black Sabbath. 2013. He makes 13,
and they
without
do a
Bill
tour.
Ward.
And they have the end.
They have the 13 album, then a world tour with that. Then he continues. That ends in like 2014. And then they do, let's do a final Black Sabbath world tour in that started in 2016. So he only had like a 2-year break.
Right.
And they do a world tour, which we missed because we were in high school and we were dipshits.
We were more focused on
a different band.
Led Zeppelin.
That was long gone since 1980.
It had been, 07 they came back and did the celebration.
So circling back, they did their final world tour. And that's when they had the Rival Sons on them.
Yes.
Opening. So I'm just trying to get to the end of his discography. He does that. Then he does Ordinary Man with, what was that guy's name? That
guy is, the guitar player is the same guy who produced the album, and it's Andrew Watt.
Yeah.
And he plays, I think, a little on Patient Number 9 too, but this one really has a big collaboration with Post Malone and Travis Scott, and that's like, if you look at the streaming numbers, that's one of his most streamed songs.
I know, it kind of irritates me, but it's okay.
Yeah, it's just because of the names on it, but honestly,
there are good songs on here. Straight to Hell, Under the Graveyard.
I like the collab he does with Elton John, the song.
That one's good. Man. It's a Raid with Post Malone. That one's kind of like hardcore.
Little Green Men.
I don't know about that one. But there are some struggle songs, but still great album. That was 2020. And fucking 3 years later, he does another one.
And this is through we don't really know about, but his personal health struggles. The Parkinson's was really, and he had back surgery that was really progressing.
Go ahead, Owen. Tell him we had tickets to see him in 2020.
So 2020 was a terrible year for concert goers.
Correct.
There's pandemic. We had many shows that got canceled on us.
Right.
We were going to meet the Rival Sons.
That's a different time.
But
we had tickets to go see Ozzy.
We were going to see Ozzy. Marilyn Manson was opening, Cincinnati, Ohio.
But he got
June of 2020. And before the pandemic even happened, this was like the first bad omen of that year. It was
canceled because of his Parkinson's.
He was physical ailments. And he was sick and he couldn't perform. So they had to cancel the tour.
Right.
And Ozzy, really lived between Patient Number 9 and really the end of his life and really Ordinary Man. He had a rough few years because of the disease he had. And that didn't stop, people's appreciation of him. And like you said, they put him on a stool and people still showed up to come see him. And the album Patient Number 9, some some hold it up to some of these early albums we talked about.
It's a great album. It's one of my favorites.
I think a really cool thing I like about that album is the people he brings in.
On.
He's got Jeff Beck, Zakk Wylde, Tony Iommi.
Tony Iommi is twice.
Yeah, and I
Zakk
like
Wylde's on it like 5 times.
Eric Clapton. Mike McCready of Pearl Jam.
Is he the bass player or is he the guitar player?
Mike McCready is the guitar player of Pearl Jam. He's the lead guitarist.
Okay. And I think Andrew Waugh maybe did the other songs that aren't listed.
I think there's like 2 songs with no featured.
They're good though. It's a great album and it's his last and I love it.
I think it's great.
Because I was so fully invested in him at that point. I was so excited to get like a new Ozzy album when I'm like a fan of him.
That's how I felt when Metallica came out with their album in 2023. It's like, this is my first time really being a huge fan and hearing a new
So maybe do you love that album?
I like it.
Yeah, that's why I love Patient Number 9 so much. Because it's the last one and it's my first one at the same time. Yeah. Being a huge fan. Now, Ordinary Man, I was close, but I wasn't as big of a fan as I am now.
You weren't as deep in the rabbit hole.
The point I'm making is he never stopped.
He never stopped.
I think they started in 1968, Black Sabbath, started recording. But, I mean, from 1970 all the way to 2023, he didn't go more than 2 or 3 years without releasing something. Right. I mean, I'm sure probably because of live albums and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So Ozzy never stopped.
And I think, too, when we look at the...
he loved it.
When we look at, like, the years he's releasing albums, like, there's tours and stuff that go on in between there that you forget about. And he tried retirement, but he got bored with it, I think. Yeah. He wanted to be in front of a crowd, like you mentioned. And, he loved the people and seeing an audience. And I've heard stories from multiple people about this. Bands would open for him, and before he would go on, he would ask them, like, is anybody out there?
Yeah.
And he still, after all his success...
He was humble.
He wouldn't know if people would show up to see him. And he could sell that place out easily.
I know.
And
he was humble about it.
He was.
And later in life, I think, for sure,
I think
people still wanted to come see me.
Right. And I think that's definitely an admirable quality to have for somebody like him in his position. So Ozzy's legacy, we kind of covered the bases from his origins in Black Sabbath all the way through his solo career and his TV show and everything else, all the bands he's brought along. And his impact is really larger than words can say. So how, to kind of put a bow on things here, how will you remember Ozzy Osbourne?
I'm probably going to end up buying every record on vinyl and put them on my wall, and I'll make sure that, I mean, dude, his music doesn't get old to me. There's like some songs I don't get tired of. War Pigs is one of them.
Right.
These albums I've heard this album 10 times, and I love it. I love it. I love everything about it. I'll just always listen to them, show my nephews when they grow old, and, have it on the car. And I got a Black Sabbath sticker on my car, and I pay. It's not even like I'm a fake fan. I just love it. Yeah. I love his voice. I love his persona. I love hearing all the different time periods, different guitar players. It's sick. Even the Tony stuff. Tony Iommi. He sounds different every 2 albums.
Yeah. He definitely evolves and the sound changes from, I mean, you listen to Black Sabbath and you listen to Never Say Die. Those 2 albums are years apart.
I mean, they're only 8 years difference, but like the way they just progress.
Yeah.
How will you pay homage to Ozzy?
I'll remember Oz. This podcast is called Owen's Rock and Metal Podcast, and a lot of people would give him a lot of credit in creating metal.
Yeah.
And he's a huge player, like we've touched on. Some of his sound maybe goes a little more in the rock direction, but we turn on our local rock radio, you're going to hear Flying High Again. Yeah. You're going to hear Crazy Train.
You're going to hear Paranoid.
Yeah, you're going to hear these songs. So, and I think that's a great thing about the music. And what you touched on, a lot of people have said this, but it's timeless in a way. And the way you felt hearing a certain Black Sabbath song or album the first time, that's how you'll feel hearing it almost every time.
Yeah, every time.
And you're not, it's hard to grow tired of it. With the music, it's going to be there, and we're able to pass it on to future generations, and just keeping his legacy alive, and just telling people about it. Like people who don't know Black Sabbath, I feel sorry for them almost but it's exciting because they have an opportunity to get into
I know.
Them, so
like, yeah, you know who Ozzy Osbourne is? Yeah. Did you know he's the singer of Black Sabbath? No. It's like you're missing out.
Right.
On 9 phenomenal albums.
Honestly, it's a shame he passed away, but he was in poor health and he was older. But now that that has happened, I think it has opened the door for a lot of people to listen to some of his music. And they know the hit. But if you look at the streaming numbers, they're soaring. I mean, Sabbath, prior to his passing, or after Back to the Beginning, prior to his passing, Sabbath was at 19 million monthly listeners. They're now over 30 million.
Yeah. And the songs that are Changes is high.
Changes is jumping up there. And that's like...
But you never know, because the way War Pigs caught me can catch some other 17, 19-year-old kid who's just getting into this.
Right. They could hear Breakout.
I mean, yeah. But the way War Pigs caught me,
yeah.
Ozzy's voice, just the guitar tone is such a cool song.
Definitely. Ozzy Zig needed a gig.
Started it all
those years ago. And here we are, mourning his passing, and we're still talking about his legacy. And I think we'll be listening to his albums for life.
Yeah, I could talk Ozzy for 8 hours straight.
We'll definitely have to consider doing breakdown episodes of some more Sabbath albums and Ozzy albums and telling the whole story and different tracks and breaking them down. But this is going to conclude part 1 of the celebration of Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath episode of Owen's Rock and Metal podcast. Stay tuned for part 2, where I have a conversation with another guest about his view on Ozzy Osbourne's legacy and his opinion on Black Sabbath. So thank you all for tuning in to part 1 here today. And as always, never stop rocking. What's going on, everybody? This is Owen from Owen's Rock and Metal podcast, and welcome into part 2 of episode number 38, where we are celebrating the life of Ozzy Osbourne, the career of Ozzy, and this career of Black Sabbath. As we know, Ozzy passed away on July 22nd of 2025 after what we know now was a heart attack. He had been battling Parkinson's for years. On July 5th in Birmingham, his home city, he did a one last farewell show, Back to the Beginning, which featured a lineup of some of the greatest acts in rock and heavy metal today. So part 1 of the episode, we sat down with John and we discussed some of his favorite Black Sabbath moments, some of his favorite Ozzy Osbourne solo moments, and we are here to do the same with frequent guest of the show, Jaxon. Jaxon, thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. As always, love coming on here to talk. So thanks for bringing me back on.
Absolutely. So glad to have you. Obviously, we are here today to kind of talk about Ozzy and talk about his career, both in Black Sabbath and as a solo artist. So why don't you go ahead and just talk a little bit about your sort of fandom of Ozzy? Where do you see yourself as an Ozzy fan, as a Black Sabbath fan? Are you a mega fan? Are you a casual enjoyer? Where do you rank yourself?
Yeah, I'm definitely not as deep as John is. He really got into Ozzy and Sabbath around college or whenever. So I'm not as deep as him, but I would say I am somewhat, maybe a little more than just a casual fan, than like the baseline of what most people are. I think everybody is at least a casual fan of Ozzy because he's just such a big personality in rock and metal. And it's really cool to see how the whole world has reacted, because I think everybody has some respect for him. I think that's really cool. But yeah, I think so. When I first kind of heard Ozzy, got into Ozzy and Sabbath, it was like a lot of people from my parents, specifically my dad, who's into rock and metal music. He would always be playing just whatever he's into when I was younger around the house. He had some pretty nice speakers, a pretty nice speaker setup, and that was just something he was really into. He just like playing music on them. So I would basically just listen to whatever he would put on. And as a pretty young kid, I would be into just trying to pretend that I'm like also playing drums or playing guitar or singing. And eventually he got me like a little drum set and I got really into it. It's how I kind of really got into music. But Ozzy, somebody that my dad was really into, he would play him. He would tell me as I got older a little bit about shows he would go to and stories of concerts that he was at and things about Ozzy, because he liked him and he would like to share those with his son and kind of culture me in a way.
Yeah, definitely. I can relate to having my parents to thank for passing down a lot of music because, we're from the generation that we're from, born in the 2000s. A lot of this stuff had already existed prior to us, so we needed somebody to show us. And in my case as well, a lot of that came from my parents. I can remember, in fact, I'm looking at it just off camera right now. There's a copy of Ozzy's first album, his first solo album, Blizzard of Oz, which my parents had quite a few CDs that were just around the house, and we had a CD player, and I would play them and I would listen to them, and the big songs like Crazy Train on that album you would recognize even as a kid, because that song is so massive. By listening to it on a CD and having the full album, you get to maybe discover some other songs that you might not have known if it wasn't for having all those songs collected on one disc, which is the beauty of an album. But that is definitely a story I can relate to. So in terms of Ozzy's, we'll start with his solo work, and we can backpedal and work our way back to Black Sabbath if we decide to go there. But in terms of Ozzy's solo career, do you have any favorite songs or favorite albums that stick out to you?
Yeah, I would say that I am somebody that falls kind of more into a lot of the bigger songs are the ones that I like the most, like Mr. Crowley and Crazy Train and No More Tears and stuff like along those lines. A lot of the ones that have been played a lot recently just because of his passing, all the big ones that are very recognizable. But yeah, I would say I like his earlier stuff when he started his solo career, partly because it almost maybe feels like he had something to prove. And I would say probably his two most popular songs are off of his first album. So that is something to me. I typically like to go back to a band's first album because I don't know, there's something about the beginning of a band and the starting album that kind of kicks it all off. I do that with a lot of other of my favorite bands. So I really like those. When I don't know what age, but my dad got me an MP3 player, and it basically I was too young to really have my own music taste, but he gave one to me, and he just loaded a bunch of songs up, basically that he thought I would like, and that he was also just into. So I was just listening to an MP3 player of my dad's music, basically sometimes, and it was more of all kinds of rock and metal stuff, but mainly Ozzy's solo career than the Sabbath stuff was on there. And it was a lot of the big hits, and it just made it even more, I guess, just burned into my memory when I listened to those.
Right. Definitely. We talk about these big hits and how these songs are so ingrained in our society and in our culture. Ozzy, as a figure, he had an entire image that was bigger than the music. With the show The Osbournes in the 2000s, that's where a lot of people, maybe in our generation, were introduced to Ozzy or introduced to that image or that look. And of course, there's the stories of him biting heads off of bats and snorting a line of ants and crazy things like that, which are still talked about today as if they're modern day myths or modern day legends. Is there any particular story that you have that reflects maybe a time where Ozzy's imagery and character kind of stood out? Is there any moment where maybe he was featured in something like a TV show or something along those lines that you can vividly remember?
Yeah, yeah. So with my dad kind of having an influence on me and trying to culture me, I'm sure he was like, "Oh, this is my son. I want to make sure that he, is into the stuff I'm into, or what I'll do. I bet I'll do the same thing." He would tell me about Ozzy and those types of stories of him, like, yeah, like he bit the head off of a bat and snorted ants and stuff. He would just say stuff like that and tell me stories, or he would tell me his own stories from when he would go see them and crazy stuff that people would be doing in the crowds. It it really gave me like more of a perception of Ozzy and who he is in the rock and metal world. There was a Guitar Hero that came out in the early 2000s, and since I was into pretending to play the music when I was a little bit younger, when my dad would play it, I loved Guitar Hero because it was that, but just a little bit more. And I was about 7 or 8 when this game came out. This isn't a lot of people, I would say there's like debate. In my opinion, this is the best Guitar Hero, Guitar Hero World Tour. Guitar Hero 3 is also pretty good, but I really got into Guitar Hero around World Tour, and it was for the Wii. And they had a bunch of famous people in this one. They had a bunch of different musicians that would come in and play and do whatever their thing is. I didn't know the majority of them. I didn't know like any of them. As like a 7 or 8 year old, I'm like, yeah, whatever.
Right.
They had like Haley Williams from Paramore, and I don't think I knew who Travis Barker was. He was in the game, and Zach Wilde, who is has a relation to Ozzy. Didn't know who he
Connection.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there is a level when Ozzy comes out to sing, and I'm like 7 or 8 years old. I would get so roped into this game. To me, it was so real. Like I felt like I was playing in front of a crowd when I was playing this game. And I'm probably just, like on easy mode or whatever. It just hit like the 3 buttons or whatever it gives you.
Right.
And I got to the level, like I'm just playing at my dad's house, probably some weekend night. I got to the point where Ozzy comes out, and it was like, oh my God, because I did know who Ozzy was, and I had seen pictures and videos and stuff. Sometimes my dad would play music videos on the TV. So I knew who Ozzy was. Very iconic look with his glasses and his hair, and he comes out and there's like bats flying around him. And to me, at that young age, being so sucked into the game, he might as well have just been in my living room with me. I thought it was so cool. And so he comes out, he sings Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley. And yeah, it was just so real to me. And I thought it was so awesome. He might as well, yeah, have been there. And that's definitely my favorite part of that game is when he comes out to sing his songs. No matter if like you can play any instrument in that game. That was the first Guitar Hero to introduce drums and bass and singing, part of why I think it's the best. But even if you're the singer, like if you're playing the singer and you have your customized character or whatever up there, I'm pretty sure it will boot you off and replace you with Ozzy for those songs. You pretty much Ozzy comes out almost no matter what whenever
Yeah.
those songs play, and it's really cool.
Yeah, I remember. I think I had that game too for the Wii, and it was a lot of fun. We don't have it anymore, but
I still
you know,
do. So you
you
should come
still have
play
it.
it. Yes,
I was
yeah.
going to say that story makes me think, why don't they make these games anymore? Because
Yeah.
they're fun. I mean, I would play those now, honestly.
I still play this game. I still play this like when friends come over, we'll break out Guitar Hero, especially any friends that I have that are like into music, and we'll just play it because it's just so much fun. But yeah, good point.
Yeah, definitely would be something I would probably be more into it now, and I would
Yeah.
know more of the music now than I would have when I was, 10 years old, however old when those games were still being made. But, and too, I don't know, like the Wii is, I think, like, I don't know. The Wii works well with it, but obviously you can play it with different consoles and stuff, and
Right.
there's
Yeah.
different Guitar Hero versions. Like Metallica had a Guitar Hero. Like,
Yep. Yeah.
huge Metallica fan, would definitely have loved to play that, but I wasn't into it enough at the time to experience all that. But maybe they'll bring it back. I don't know.
I think they're supposed to make another one. There was something about another one coming. They tried to reboot it maybe 5 years ago. No, actually, shit. Probably would have been like 10 years ago at this point, but it was really weird, and it was a different style, and it just didn't really work. And it was only guitar. There was no drums or bass or singing, which is
Yeah,
part of the fun, is like getting the whole like group, like to
yeah.
make a band.
We had the
Yeah.
drum set and the microphone and the
Yeah.
guitar.
Which that's a whole nother thing too, is having instruments that still work. Like
Right.
that's a big thing, because I have a drum set that once I basically started sometime in college when I was working, or maybe just out of college, I wanted to get a fully working like nice drum set for Guitar Hero just to play with my friends. And yeah, I love that I have one now because it works. I can play it. It's fun to break out sometimes. But yeah, Guitar Hero is great. And I love seeing Ozzy in that one. It was very cool. As I've gotten older, like to your point, I've only appreciated the game more. And for what it did for me as even a young, just getting into music, and it made me want to literally play drums. Like I've had this conversation with other friends. Like I have another friend, and he was like, yeah, that game literally made me want to learn guitar. Like it did so much. I don't know why they stopped. I think it was just, it kind of the Wii started to die, and then I think rock and metal also kind of left. Like the early 2000s, a lot of metal was still around, still pretty popular. Kind of
Mhm.
went away for a little bit. I think it's kind of coming back a little more, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Aside from Guitar Hero there, which is
Yeah,
awesome.
sorry.
And we can maybe do a whole episode on the different Guitar Hero games at some
Yeah.
point.
Oh, I love that.
Focusing on the Ozzy and the Black
Hmm.
Sabbath. So we talked a little bit about Ozzy's solo career, which you talked about. My favorite album is Blizzard of Oz. I love those hits that are featured on that, and even some of the more maybe lesser known stuff like Suicide Solution, Goodbye to Romance. These songs are still great quality to me, and I think kind of what you were talking about with first albums, it's almost like with the first album for Ozzy as a solo artist, it's like he had something to prove where he's gotten kicked out of the band that he was in prior, which had laid tremendous and momentous ground for the heavy metal genre as a whole. So many metal bands will attribute Black Sabbath as an influence. It's almost like it's a requirement, but
Yeah.
uh, seeing where he came from and how things ended with Black Sabbath, having Blizzard and those hits come out of that first record, and really showing, okay, Ozzy's is going to be all right on his own. I
Hmm.
think that's definitely makes it significant in his discography, and one that stands out. Shifting gears now to his Black Sabbath career. Um, are you a fan of Black Sabbath? I know we kind of touched on this at the top, but is it also the same sort of just maybe just a little beyond the surface level material? You
Hmm.
don't deep dive it, but you're respected and it's out
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, yeah, I'm like at the same level there.
there. Mm-hmm.
Not extreme Sabbath fan, but heavily respect it. I like a lot of the music, and I think there's just so much respect for them because of what they've done for just yeah, the whole genre of metal and rock, and every one of my favorite bands, it's an influence. I think just to your point, it just is such a big thing. If I got up and started a band, like that's absolutely like I'm sure we'd still always be saying that. But yeah, Sabbath, I really like their first album as well. Same thing kind of with Ozzy's first album. It's just kind of the beginning. They're just putting themselves out there. That was really a point where I feel like it just kicked things off for them. It's so fun to listen to and imagine it coming out in the 70s and just what that was like, and maybe the controversy and just everything around the album, and then people listening to it and being like, oh man, this is cool and dark and different. I want to do something like that. And I want to make something like this that's this cool.
Yeah, definitely that influence. I was reading a article in Guitar World magazine recently, and they were interviewing KK Downing, who is one of the original guitarists for Judas Priest, and he is also from Birmingham. And in the interview, they asked him about Black Sabbath and how much of an influence that was on Judas Priest, and he had said, "Well, I wasn't really aware of them until that album came out." But it was really neat to hear this sound that they were and this music they were creating, because it was similar to what I wanted to play, but it was almost like validation in a sense that somebody else is doing this out there. There's other people who make this kind of music, and there's a space for this. So definitely, the influence has always been there, I think, and it's almost like a green light, like a validation. Like I said, like there's a space for this. But we talked kind of about the eeriness of that first album. Even the cover art, for those
Yeah.
unfamiliar, is definitely got this mysterious figure and some of this house with these overgrown weeds, and it all looks kind of dead and mysterious.
Is it, sorry, is it a witch? Like, is that, I don't know if that's like confirmed or like, that's just what I've heard. Like, it's a witch
Yeah,
or something?
I don't know the full story. You can look up who the person is that is
Yeah.
on the cover, but I don't know if that's like what they're trying to portray. For the longest, I thought it was somebody in the band, but it is kind of, and again, like the figure on the cover, who is that? We don't know, and that's part of the
Yeah.
mystery and kind of the aura, if you will, of the album. But another cool thing I think of, the music itself is kind of got this spooky undertones, we'll call it. It was released on a Friday the 13th. So that's another superstitious kind of day that it's almost like they have like a storybook beginning. Tony Iommi's fingers get chopped off in a factory and literal bloodshed creates this music that is like of the devil or whatever. So it's definitely got some sort of, we'll say, like horror themes there. And as a horror fan yourself, what sort of overlap do you see between like the horror genre and some of Black Sabbath's early work and some of the musical themes that they're exploring?
Yeah, I think so for anybody that, especially at a young age where you're so easy to influence, having a look that is dark and scary. A lot of the time people they'll see that and it's kind of, gives you that like uneasy, creepy feeling, but it's like intriguing and you're interested, and then you just kind of want to dig and find more out about it. So I think having that look and having that darker, creepy, very, kind of demonic look, I think it draws people in and it makes people want to come be a part of it, and they're just interested in it because it looks cool. Like a lot of horror movies and other just, yeah, creepy stuff out there, especially then thinking about the 70s and kind of putting that out there, and that's starting to become a popular type of music and like a scene and style. I feel like prior, just that was very like pushed away. Like let's not have this weird, creepy, demonic music. I feel like, just as things go on and everything kind of evolves and people change. You know, Prior to that, they're calling other things like, oh, that's demonic and this is demonic. And then this comes out and it's straight up like dark and like it's really going for it. It's creepy and it's very just like it's like droning and like some of
Yeah.
the first opening track, and it's just kind of like going on. They're using those like tritones. It just sounds very off. I could see people being very upset about it. But then there was enough people that were into it that thought, oh, this is actually really cool, that it worked, and then they just kept going.
Yeah, it's interesting that like public's attitude was like this is demonic, but I think if you ask any of the guys in Sabbath, they weren't going for a
No.
demonic sound. That's not they weren't Satanists. They weren't going for this, but that's just how it got spun and that's how it was pictured. But I think too, and we're talking about really they started in kind of the late 60s, and that's where coming out in the 60s was a big time for music in general, especially popular music, especially rock and roll music. It's really where it started to grow and evolve. And the Beatles, Ozzy was a huge fan of the Beatles, and that was a big influence. So it just shows how with different people's creativity, you can take something like the Beatles and you can evolve it into Black Sabbath if you get the right people in a room together. So
Right.
I definitely enjoy that first record as well. I like that it's just the collaboration is really strong. They were just a young band starting out. They would play live shows and they needed material to have. And a lot of these songs were just made up of different jams that they would do together. So they would just sort of sometimes throw stuff together, maybe on the fly at a live event, and this would stick and it would end up just being on their album. That's why on that first album, there's multiple tracks that are like 4 song names put together, and it's like 13 minutes long, but it's good. I mean, I can't say it's bad, but it just shows how different their writing style was and how their collaborative approach was different. And they were young, they were hungry, and like we kind of touched on the first album, they're wanting to go for it, and they've got nothing to lose. So
Yeah.
definitely that
Yeah.
sticks to me.
I love, speaking of the Beatles, there's a lot of clips of Ozzy going around right now since his passing. And I love the clip of him, like Ozzy, this like huge, like rock and roll, like legend, him like meeting Paul McCartney. And he's
Yeah,
just like, oh my God, like it's Paul McCartney. Like,
yeah,
that's his, like, that is like somebody that's just so, he like has such a hero and influential, like to him, just to see somebody that is that to everybody else. Like Paul McCartney's, I mean, like everybody loves, the Beatles, and they're a huge influence on a lot of stuff. But it's really funny to see someone like Ozzy, like see one of his heroes and be like,
right.
holy shit, like look, it's a Paul
Yeah.
McCartney. And It's like that's odd. Like what? Like
You're
I
Ozzy
don't know.
Osbourne.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you're Ozzy, so like, yeah. Like, what do you mean?
And I think John and I touched on this in part one, but that I think is a indicative, and I think it demonstrates Ozzy's humbleness.
Yeah,
A lot of people will talk, and Ozzy came from a working class background, and he came from a house where he had many siblings. And I've read and heard interviews that he didn't even have indoor plumbing until he was in his teenage years. He had to go out to an outhouse. Um, I think that he always had appreciation for the fans. And there's different stories of different people have opened for him. Once they're done with their opening set, he would ask them, "Is there anybody out there?" And the place is sold out, packed, because he's such a big draw. But he was still unsure, like, are people really going to want to come see me? And of course, people want to come see Ozzy. But the fact that he put himself, despite all his success, and still thought that way, I think is a clear example of his humbleness, and I think it reflects on his roots a lot. But yeah, Black Sabbath, their entire career is full of legendary tracks. Through his solo career, Ozzy goes on and continues to make hits and music that we still hear on the radio today. So in terms of sort of thinking back on Ozzy's legacy as a whole, we've kind of talked about his solo work, we've talked about Black Sabbath a little bit. For you, how will you remember Ozzy's legacy?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think it's kind of cool because he has left such a mark on the world. I feel like Ozzy um will, and even after his passing, like he's never really going to like die. Like he lives throughout and through on in the years through his art and the music he created. He made such an impact on the world that he'll be like a figure for a long time, right? And I think that's really cool. I think I'll remember him always. Just even I feel like through bands that I am like a huge fan for, like Slipknot, for example. Like they like Corey, the singer, is he talks about Ozzy and how upset he was just to the passing, just to know like Ozzy's not with us anymore. It's not like he was making new music right now, but it's just that he's no longer with us. It's tragic for him, and other bands. I think Ozzy, in a way, he kind of lives on through those other bands and just the legacy he's created. It sounds kind of corny, but like it's just kind of true. It's just he is forever in that music. Another thing for Slipknot, relating to Slipknot, there's another story when Corey first met Ozzy, and he was sitting he told this, I don't know if it was recently or if it was, I just saw the clip recently because of the passing.
Mhm.
He was sitting at like catering, and I don't know if the entire band was there or if it was just most of the band. And he was actually sitting with Sharon, and Ozzy came up and like was, just asking for something or whatever. And then she introduced them like, oh, this is the band I was talking about with 9 members. And he's like, 9 members. He's like, I want to be number 10. Corey, of course, is like, anytime. Like, like, holy shit, he's
Yeah,
just joking around, which is also really cool, just how jokey he is. But I want to be number 10. Like, that's
right.
hilarious. So yeah, he lives on through all these other influences that I really hope, and I think I think you'll be able to track it kind of back a lot of stuff, at least. You'll be able to you can track it all the way back there. I hope that that's, passed down. It's kind of like my father to me. It's kind of like everyone's responsibility to kind of, culture their children and, keep things going. And I think that that's really cool.
Hmm.
I did have one other story too I wanted to say about
Please go ahead.
Ozzy's, was the Sabbath first album.
Hmm.
I was so through college, I'm a graphic designer, and I went to like a graphic design school, very small. I had to take a like art history class. I was very annoyed that I had already taken one, and it was like one of those ones in high school, and you're supposed to get like college credits, but it didn't transfer or something like that. So I had to retake like an art history class, and I was kind of pissed about it. But it ended up being one of my favorite classes. And part of that is because the teacher taught it in a way that it was kind of like, okay, nothing lives in a vacuum, right? Everything has influence from everywhere. So it was basically a history class, just on like pop culture and media through the 20th century. So just from like 1900 to 1999, and we did it by decades. And it was a really cool class. It was really fun. And it touched on music. It touched on, like just big events, World War II, things like just, big things, the 80s and just media and the 80s and the 90s. And then once we finally got to the end of the class, it was like, okay, now I want you guys to present something, and it could be anything from that century that had an influence on something that you just want to show to the class. And so we were going through it, and I picked, and it could be anything. It could be a video or like art or whatever. I picked Black Sabbath's first album, and I picked their first song to play too. And I kind of just picked that and talked a little bit about um, just their influence on everything and rock and metal and just their influence on music as a whole. I don't know. A lot of those people probably had already heard of Ozzy, of course. A bunch of college students. I'm sure everyone knows Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley and hits like that. But I was playing Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath, and I could tell it was actually my teacher who like had to, pause it and start it. It takes a minute for that song to kind of slowly build up. And it was kind of funny, just like looking around the room of like all these like art girls in here, like listening to this, they're kind of like this, what is this? What the hell is this? So it was kind of funny, but I just was trying to, describe this band, and Ozzy paved the way for a lot of the future and just influenced a lot of things. And that was pretty fun to get to share, I guess, with the class.
Yeah, and it's funny. I thought of a story while you were sharing that, similar, slightly different. I took a history of rock class at OU. So this was history of rock. There was two parts. So two different classes, two different semesters. So history of rock 1 covered rock and roll music from 1950 to 1970. And that doesn't really include Black Sabbath. History of Rock 2 did include Black Sabbath. There was 1 week of the course was just a heavy metal week. It was a once a week class, so it was actually during COVID too, so it was all remote. But I remember the professor, he would record these lectures, and he had said, on a Friday the 13th, February 13th, 1970, Black Sabbath created heavy metal with this, and he played Black Sabbath in that intro. And I'm probably sure we had to do one of those, discussion board assignments where you respond to this, and then you have two of your classmates respond to your response to the prompt, and those silly little assignments. But it was neat to see that sort of music that I had known about, and hear it be discussed in an academic setting was really neat. So definitely can relate to your story there. Definitely looking back and reflecting on Ozzy's entire legacy, it's going to live on not just through the music that he was a part of, but also the music he influenced, like you mentioned. I mean, the number of bands is countless almost. You mentioned Slipknot, they were at one of the early Ozfests. Metallica on one of Ozzy's solo tours, they opened up for him. Van Halen opened up for Ozzy Osbourne. Kiss, or they opened up for Black Sabbath. Kiss opened up for Black Sabbath. So all these bands over the years, if they weren't influenced by the music just by listening to it, they likely got some help playing and getting some audience time and exposure by opening up for a big name and a big label. So I think Ozzy has always given back, even now with an artist like Youngblood, who was featured at the Back to the Beginning show, and I think Back to the Beginning show was a big moment for him and gave him a lot of positive exposure. And Ozzy always tried to, from what I can tell, do well for other artists and help them along. And I think he always had kind of a positive approach, was humble, was thankful for what he had, and gave back, so to speak, to the community, and that is, the metal community. But
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, the like Youngblood connection there, because I know how much Youngblood liked Ozzy, especially seeing clips from that show and just other things relating to him and Ozzy. And he sings like Changes now at like every one of his shows because of Ozzy's passing. And I think Ozzy like saw himself in Youngblood. Definitely, like, he saw himself in him as a upcoming artist. I don't know much Youngblood at all. I don't really listen to him. I've never looked at his music, but I know who he is, and I didn't know like mess with Ozzy like that until I saw clips of him talking and, whatever, being around Ozzy. Yeah, I think that that's kind of cool. Because yeah, I don't know, he's just, yeah, Ozzy was very, I think, just aware of what's up and coming and what's new, and he was always open to that type of stuff. And I think he's just saw himself in young blood, especially like he's from the UK, right, too, young
Yeah.
blood.
Yeah.
And I think he just, that kind of like rock star personality, I think he just, yeah, saw that, like it reminded himself when he was up and coming. And so he kind of, gave him a bit of a platform to perform at his show, and
Right.
just kind of gave him some exposure. And I think that is really humble, and that's really cool.
Yeah, and definitely with that last show, kept a lot of the people that he's worked with, and some of the big names that he's had some part in, or definitely was maybe a fan of, or whatever it was. They all came back for one final show, which I did not get to watch the pay-per-view for that, but obviously the clips have been circulating around, so it was really a cool thing to have that happen, and especially get it in before Ozzy's passing. But to put a kind of bow on this thing, obviously Ozzy's going to be immensely missed by the entire metal community, and his legacy will live on through the music and through the groups that he has influenced. Before we go ahead and get out of here, episode 38 of Owen's Rock and Metal Podcast, did you have any parting thoughts for the listeners out there?
Yeah, I guess, I don't know. I think I really said everything I want to say. I think bands will carry his legacy. I think it's just crazy, there's, for just what he was doing at the time he was doing it, there's just never going to be another Ozzy. And it's sad to know that he's no longer with us. And I always enjoyed even seeing the clips of him in his older age talk about whatever topics, and they, like, him and his wife, and like they have like that podcast. Wow, what is it called? There's like some
I think it's
podcast
called
of
the
him.
Osbournes
It's a
podcast.
podcast now. Yeah.
Not a podcast. Not a podcast. It was Kelly, Jack,
Right.
Jack
Yeah.
and Ozzy. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would see clips from that all the time, and they're showing Ozzy something, or they're all discussing something, and he would have, his funny remarks. And it's funny because he's like a rock star, but he's also like this old dude, so like you get a little bit of both. But yeah, I would see, like, pictures of like Kelly and Sid now from Slipknot. I follow
Yeah.
Sid, I follow Kelly, I follow Slipknot. Hear about them, and their baby, and him proposing at the last show. And that's definitely, even now, it's very special that he got to do that. But that's insane. Imagine your dad is in Slipknot and your grandpa was the Prince of Darkness. Like, the amount of pressure on that kid. I mean, he probably won't get it. Who knows? He probably won't. Sometimes they don't even get into music. Sometimes they do. But that's just like insane pressure to do
Yeah.
something
There's,
cool.
there's a legacy to uphold.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, it's crazy. There really truly will never be another Ozzy, but he'll definitely be remembered.
Absolutely. And we wanted to take our time here on Owen's Rock and Metal Podcast today to remember Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness, who did pass away at the age of 76. So we want to thank everybody for tuning in today to Owen's Rock and Metal Podcast. I know this was a little bit of a longer episode with 2 parts with 2 different guests, but we were happy to do it to come together for Ozzy and to celebrate all of his work. So thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to listen to past episodes if you like what we've heard here today. We've got a lot of different albums covered, a lot of different groups we've talked about in the past. So closing in on 1,000 total plays for the podcast in its lifetime. So looking forward to hitting that milestone at some point here in the future. But thank you all for tuning in today, and look forward to the next episode coming down the pipe. And as always, never stop rocking.